The biggest single-day election in history is underway in Indonesia, with almost 200 million people eligible to vote in the country's presidential, parliamentary and provincial elections. Indonesia correspondent Anne Barker joins us now from Jakarta. And people in Australia can sometimes get impatient waiting in line to vote. I can't imagine what the lines are like in Indonesia today. How have officials been handling the logistical headache they no doubt have?
Rachel, it's a mammoth task. When you see this polling booth behind me, there are actually 810,000 of them across the country. But in fact, each polling booth has an average of only 250 voters that are registered. So that has meant there haven't been long queues, and it's kind of maximised the turnout because in any part of the country, the chances of having a polling booth very close to where you live is very high. And I'm told, in fact, at this polling booth in central Jakarta, the turnout has been about 73% already among the 222 voters. But across the country, there are 245,000 candidates being elected to 20,000 seats. It is the biggest single-day election, I believe, in the world, where the Indonesians are voting for a president. They're voting for the two houses of parliament nationally, provincial legislatures and city or district councils. So there is a mammoth task in getting election material across the country. They've used horses, they've used canoes to take ballot papers to some booths, and I'm told that even in the islands north of Jakarta, they're using speedboats as sort of mobile polling stations for people there.
Of course, it hasn't been perfectly smooth sailing. We've heard of thousands of pre-filled votes being uncovered. How's that issue being dealt with?
That's right. There were tens of thousands of votes discovered in a warehouse in Malaysia for Indonesians who live and work in Malaysia. Those votes appeared to have been tampered with. They showed that they'd already been marked in favour of Joko Widodo, the incumbent president. Even though they were postal ballots, there was enough suspicion surrounding them that the electoral authorities here have now ordered that those 320,000 people in Kuala Lumpur will be allowed to vote again. There have been other allegations, of course, of Prabowo Subianto, the challenger to the President Joko Widodo. He alleges there are something like 17.5 million ghost names on the electoral roll, people who don't exist. He's threatening that he could challenge the result depending on the outcome, whether there's any hint of vote rigging or voter manipulation. That's something he did at the last election, but it ultimately failed. But it's something he is flagging as a possibility again.
How much of a sure thing is it that the incumbent Joko Widodo will be re-elected?
Well, look, most of the polls almost universally have suggested that he will win comfortably. Some polls suggest that he could have a majority of up to 20% over Prabowo Subianto. We could know as early as this afternoon if that's likely. We may not know what the actual margin is, but we will know potentially what the result looks like if that margin's wide enough. Prabowo Subianto, though, himself has said as late as yesterday that he's confident of winning up to 63% of the vote. He claims that he's done his own internal polling that shows that he is the clear favourite. But that goes against the grain of all the other polls, and one Australian political analyst, Marcus Mietzner at the ANU, has said that that will be the end of opinion polling in Indonesia if it turns out that Prabowo Subianto wins, simply because all the polls, except for his, suggest that will not happen.
How much has religion come into this election? Obviously, Indonesia, a huge Muslim population.
Well, look, Prabowo Subianto has the support of many of the Islamic and even Islamist parties. So most of the conservative Muslim groups and parties in Indonesia, a lot of them have backed him. This is a country that in the last 5 years, even under Joko Widodo's rule, has gone increasingly to the right. It has become increasingly conservative. More and more women, for example, are wearing the veil here. There's been a decline in restrictions on freedom of speech. There have been cases where people who have insulted Islam or insulted the Quran have been jailed. The previous Jakarta governor was jailed for 2 years for that. So this is a country that has moved towards much more conservative Islam. And Joko Widodo, who has come under criticism for not being Muslim enough in the past, has taken as his running mate a conservative Islamic cleric. something he didn't do last time around. So even if he wins, there are big question marks about what his next term would be like and whether he, as secular president, will still take Indonesia in a more conservative direction.
Anne Barker, our Indonesia correspondent there at one of the many polling places in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you.